Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's nice to have you all here. This afternoon, we're on the American Women Writers National Museum program called Dramatic Women Who Play Wright. It's obviously a play on words. These very talented women are each playwrights. And so we're going to get into that in just a moment. But usually I give an introduction because people ask me, who are you? And what is the museum and so on. So my name, as I said, is Janice Law, and I'm the founder of American Women Writers National Museum. We women purchase 70% of the books sold in America. So it's a good marketing and business decision, the museum, of course. And if you look at any cultural event, concerts, theater, whatever, the audience is usually dominated by women. So women have, we have preserved the cultural flame, so to speak, historically, and continue to do so. So while there are many smaller museums that honored women individually around the United States, there was no national museum to honor our great American women writers. So I established one. We're about a year old. We celebrated our first anniversary on Valentine's Day, this past Valentine's Day. And people always ask me, well, you say you're a museum. Now somebody asked me this already here. But where's your stuff? Where is your stuff? So we don't have any stuff at the moment. Oh, come on. We don't have any stuff at the moment. Oh, go ahead and get lunch. Sorry. Go ahead and get lunch. Yeah, come on back. But we are going to get stuff. I observed that most startup museums start out with brick and mortar. And they try and get buildings and all of that. And I noticed that it took them a long, long time to get started. Some of them, I know one historically here has been trying to get started for, I think, about 10 years. So I decided to do the opposite. I would start with programs, and then after I had programs for a year or 2 years and got known in the community, then we would try and get grants and move toward brick and mortar. So that was my idea. So eventually we're going to have stuff. Today, in addition to our distinguished panelists, who I will introduce in just a moment, we also have some other distinguished guests, and I was going to have them come up and say a few words about their organization, because this videotape is distributed to all the states, and some of them put it on their websites, the Centers for the Book, or they use it in their state in some way, so we want to give everybody a chance to be recognized. And I want to start with this beautiful lady here, and the white, I can't think of your name?
Mary Stone Hanley.
Mary Stone Hanley, and she's with the Black Women Playwrights in D.C. So Mary, could you come on up and say a couple words? Give a plug to your organization, as we say in the biz.
I will. Thank you very much. I've known I was going to I'm with Black Women's Playwright. Black Women's Playwright has been in existence for, I believe, 23 years. Wow. The basic goal is to support Black women in the writing of plays and involvement in theater. Some of the projects I think you might be interested in knowing is that we have a cybernetics project, which is developing connecting theater to the social media, as well as, what do I want to call it? It's not the internet. Cybernetics. So it's connecting media to the, connecting theater to the media. And it is in conjunction with universities, whereas I don't know how long this is going to be. Anyway, what's happening is playwrights across the country and theaters across the country work with universities, and students in universities create games and electronic games that connect with the theater. And it's been a really exciting project. We also have a film that we're creating. We interviewed seniors from Brookland and have created a film from the interviews that we get with them. And in the fall, we will have a yearly Black women playwrights. We do a yearly reading of the works that we're doing. So every year we do that reading. So basically, the program, I wish I had prepared and written it down. Basically, the program is to support and expand our notions of theater and writing and integrating, expanding how we think about theater. Now, I do want to put in a plug for me, and I'm passing this out, which is on the 23rd of January, I will be reading my poetry at Bloomberg's. And I promise that I will be a lot more serious. Oh, that was awful.
Don't worry, it's kind of like family. As you can see, it's an informal event because people are coming in the door and I have to go and answer the doors. It's kind of like home. You fit right in. And I understand the lady on your left, you're also from one of the local playwright organizations?
Local theater group, actually.
Theater group, come on up and introduce yourself and do a brief plug for your group.
Okay, so there's actually two companies I'm associated with. Oh, hi, I am Pamela Lehigh. I am a local DC playwright, actually born in DC, 5th generation. It's actually my birthday. I am an associate artist with two theater companies here in the DC area. One is called Grain of Sand Theater, and we believe in taking the classic and the familiar and presenting it in an unfamiliar way. 2 summers ago at Fringe Festival, we did Hamlet and took out all the monologues. So you had no insight to what was going on with Hamlet, and it was just the court's reaction to, our son's going crazy. And this summer we were doing a show for Fringe Festival, which is a slight play off the Telltale Heart, actually called Telltale, by an original play by a local DC playwright, Hunter Styles, so it's been very exciting. The other group I'm involved in is called Borealis, and they are a performance art theater group that creates happenings. Last year we did weddings in a crosswalk in DC and married about 40 people that day. This summer we're redoing that, and also this weekend in Roslyn is a very big festival called Supernova, and it's an entire weekend of performance art. So Friday you'll be getting off the Roslyn Metro to commute to work, and you'll be confronted by clowns and dancers and things like that. It runs all weekend. Sunday we're doing live rock, paper, scissors. I get to be scissors, yay. So lots of stuff happening, lots of stuff going on. We're at grainofsand.com and I believe borealis.com. So please check us out.
Excellent, thank you. Is there anybody else from a playwrights group here in the DC tri-area? Anybody else? Somebody else is smiling down there, are you?
Well, yes, but I
Get up there, Cindy. Come on.
want me
Come on
to?
up, yeah, because the videographer has to pick it up. After she's finished, is there anybody else from a playwrights group in DC? Anybody? Okay, I'll take that.
Okay, hi, sorry, apologies for being late. I'm a member of
Name?
Themby Duncan, and I'm a member of the DC Playwrights group, which is a great group that started on Facebook, and it's huge, and a number of members are here. We've probably mentioned it already. I am also lead teaching artist at Ford's Theater, and also producing artistic director at African Continuum Theater Company, which Ms. Jennifer Nelson brought to prominence, and I can only hope to continue the prominence that it has had, and to do her proud, and also just an emerging playwright and very interested in what the esteemed women this afternoon are going to share with us. Thank you.
to mention when I described Autumn that I divided the categories of honorees into historians, journalists, poets, and playwrights. So that's why we're having playwrights today. This is the first time we've had an opportunity to honor playwrights. And they're one of my favorite categories. I admire playwrights because you have to combine so many different skills to be a playwright. So these women are really, really wows. And they're sitting informally around the table up here. There are 3 of them. And what we're going to do is, I'm the moderator, I'm going to do the moderating. And I'm going to ask them some questions, and then each of them, I guess Siriana can just step up here and respond. We have to do that because the videographer has the camera in that position. But our first honoree and fabulous, fabulous guest is Mary Hall Surfett. She's an internationally recognized playwright and director specializing in theater for family audiences. She's been nominated for 9 Helen Hayes Awards. She received the award in 2002 for Outstanding Director of a Musical. Surfett's plays have been produced in major American venues, including the National Gallery of Art, the Folger Theater, and 15 productions with the Kennedy Center's Theater for Young Audiences and National Symphony Orchestra. She believes in, quote, the power of the playwriting pen. Surfett has published 2 books of monologues for middle school students, 12 plays, and 3 award-winning original cast albums of her plays. She's a recipient of the Charlotte Shorpening Prize for the American Alliance for Theater and Education for the body of her playwright work, and she has been honored by the D.C. Mayor Arts Awards. She lives in D.C. And so, when the curtain goes up, we always have to present the honorees with flowers. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. There you go.
Thank you very much.
And that's on camera, too. That's on camera. But you all know about that, how sometimes things in the plane don't go just exactly right. And so our next women panelist is Jennifer Nelson. Write What's in Your Heart advises playwright Jennifer Nelson, Director of Special Programming at Ford's Theater. Describing herself as Texas born, is that correct? That's your sister, Marilyn. No. No?
I'm Texas born at all.
Oh, okay.
Never once.
I don't know where I got that. She came to Washington, D.C. in 1972 to work with the Living Stage Theater Company, a community outreach program of Arena Stage. She said in a 2002 interview that she used to be a poet. I know her sister, Marilyn, is a very famous poet. In fact, she's the poet laureate of Connecticut. Isn't that correct?
Not currently. She was.
She was.
She did two terms. Or
2 terms, her sister. So it's very, very... Yes,
Emeritus.
Emeritus.
I like that.
So they're really talented family. She's a graduate of the University of California, Davis. Nelson has served as an adjunct professor in theater at Georgetown University. Her play, Torn from the Headlines, is a 1997 winner of the Most Outstanding New Play Award from the Helen Hayes Theater Awards. She also lives in D.C., and as we mentioned, her sister Marilyn is Poet Laureate Emeritus of Connecticut. And so give flowers also to Jennifer.
Thank you very much. And I'm not sharing them.
Sisters to the end, right? Our third very, very distinguished woman playwright is Renee Calarco. She teaches playwriting at George Washington University and improvisational comedy at the Theater Lab. I've already provided you with some. See, I knew that, I did. That was intentional. And she's a member of the Dramatists Guild of America and the D.C. Area Playwrights. Her play, Short Order Stories, received the 2007 Charles MacArthur Award. And her play, The Religion Thing, was a 2003 nominee for the same award. Some of her other plays include Keepers of the Western Door, The Mating of Angela Weiss, and If You Give a Cat a Cupcake. I wonder what happens if you... She's an artistic associate with First Draft, and she lives in D.C. So as moderator, I'll I'll start out by, I guess we can start with Mary Hall over here and work around this way. What attracted you to playwriting as opposed to other literary genres, and such as poetry, journalism, or nonfiction? Maybe you could tell us what, as a child, did you always want to be a playwright, and tell us something about that. You could step up here.
Well, I think the thing about being a playwright is that you are at the center, ideally, although as forms evolve, I think there's a horizontal way of looking at collaboration, which I find very productive. But for me, I love being at sort of the center of the genesis of something that involves the creativity of a number of people. You've got a director who is often myself, but it can also be someone else. Actors, designers, it's a very collaborative process, and it's also a process in which you have to have an enormous amount of sort of flexibility and trust, because often, and novelists or poets may have a different opinion about this, but you write a poem, the relationship is pretty much between those words and the reader. But when you write a play, you give it to a whole room full of people that then translate it into three-dimensional life. And that requires a constitution that can give and take a great deal. And so that's just extremely stimulating to me, and always has been. And I also deeply believe in the power of theater to transform lives and communities, and so that would be the kind of writing that I would want to do because of just my relationship to the field at large.
Did you always want to be a playwright, even when you were young?
Well, I did write, direct, produce, and star in a production of Peter Pan at the age of 7. And what's funny, for those that know me and know what I also organized a very large festival at the Atlas Performing Arts Center called Intersections, and so you won't be surprised to know that there were 60 7-year-olds in that production of Peter Pan. So even at a young age, I had large ideas about how to do it. But in college, it's when I directed my first play. I was actually in a gender studies class, and I wanted to adapt that Marlowe Thomas book called Free to Be You. Does anybody remember that?
Yes.
It was the first books where girls could, be this and this and this. And so I adapted it for young audiences, and I never, in all of my experiences in theater, had the experience of having an audience come in that's like bumping into each other and talking and tripping over their tennis shoes, and then they sat down and were rapt, and they booed and they awed and they were transformed. And then when they left, they said, "I loved it when the guy was climbing the mountain," and da-da-da-da. He didn't say, "I loved it when the actor stood on a cue." And I realized, this is the audience that so deeply appeals to me because of just they're ready and ripe and responsive in a way that adults not necessarily are. However, and this is, I'm not answering the question anymore, but I will say that when I do this work, though, I am equally endeavoring to reach the adults in the audience, and that's for two reasons. That I think all of my plays are about asking the question of who I want to be and how do I want to live in the world. And I don't think those are questions that stop at childhood. I don't know about you guys. And I also think that when I present very challenging content or theatrical form for children, it transforms the adults in the audience's understanding of the capacity of children. I can't tell you how many times I've had parents or teachers say to me, "I didn't think my children would understand that." We go, "Well, of course they do." Our culture constantly demeans children. And so the work I'm motivated by that as well.
Okay. Jennifer, you could speak to what attracted you to playwriting as opposed to other genres?
I like to make things up, and it was part of what got me through my childhood. I come from a family with a lot of artistry. My father was an actor and later became a playwright on his own, and my mother was a brilliant musician. But in my main part of my childhood in the 50s and early 60s, my dad was in the military. We traveled around the country a lot. He was an officer, he was a Tuskegee Airman. And most of the places that we lived, we were the only black family, or one of two, something like that. And there was, I didn't know it at the time, I know this in retrospect, you know, that some of the defense mechanisms that my sister Marilyn, that who's not the poet laureate anymore, but we lived in books because it was like an escape. It was our way of living in, you know, in worlds where we could make ourselves be, we could be whatever we wanted. You know, we were the kids who would, and as soon as we moved to a new place, the first thing we'd do is find the library. And we would each go together to the library and check out as many books as they would let us. And then we'd go home and close ourselves in our rooms and read, and then when each of us had finished her stack, we would swap and read the other ones, and then we'd go back to the library. And then later, a little later, I discovered movies, old movies, partly because I don't want to get too psychological here, but just that it was an escape. And there used to be movies on TV every afternoon when I was in junior high school. And I was just so miserable in my school, I didn't fit in anywhere. By the time, you know, we settled in a place, I spoke like this, I spoke standard English, and the black kids would be like, why do you talk like that? Who do you think you are? You think you're better than you are? So it's like I didn't fit in with the African American community, and I didn't fit in with the white kids either. And so I was just this total escapist into books and movies. And most of the movies that I watched and loved were movies from the 30s and 40s that they would show on TV. And a big part of my adolescence was reimagining those movies with either me in it, or somebody I knew in it, or fixing the story so I wouldn't have done that. I would have had to come back in and do this, or maybe it wasn't really a lion, it was this, you know. And then when my dad got out of the military, he went back to his first love, which was the theater. And he did a lot of community theater. And he loved plays, but at the time his favorite thing was the French kind of absurdists, the Ionesco and Sartre. It was when those things were new in America, kind of. And he would buy scripts, and since we were never forbidden to read whatever was in the house, so I started reading plays. Then I had absolutely no idea what was going on. I don't even remember, I think he did. He was in a production of The Mad Woman of Chaillot and things like this, and I just, I didn't know what it was, but I loved it. And then I started helping him learn his lines, and then, you know, we would read scenes together at home, and I never ever thought there was a career for me in the performing arts, because I never saw anybody who looked like me do anything other than play the maid. There was Beulah the Maid on television when I was in school. Those of you who were old enough to remember that. And I just, you know, was like, okay, that is not something I want to be or want to do. So I pictured myself with an entirely different career. I was going to be a diplomat or something, a lawyer or a school teacher. And sorry, I hope I'm not going on too long, because I forgot to know where I was. Oh, so yeah, so when I went to college, I stumbled into a class on improvisation, and that was a real eye-opening thing. It was also a very volatile period during the civil rights movement, and we were all kind of wrapped up in the conversations that were going on about it. And then there was the black theater movement of trying to use theater as a way to say things that could not be said just in ordinary dialogue, or to reach people and to talk about people's lives. And so I ended up in theater but actually my BA is in political science. And I dropped out of a theater, one of the very first MFA programs in the country. I am a graduate school dropout, never went back. I never had any regrets about that. But, I loved doing theater, but there was still nothing that was about me. There was nothing I could relate to, you know, and then I wouldn't get cast either, you know, when there was a play, when there's a, what were the women doing anyway? They were the ingenue or the old lady, something like that. And then if there was a maid, you know, then that could possibly be. And I wouldn't do those things. I wouldn't take those roles. And eventually, I was also becoming more and more political because that was, I'm sorry, it was a political era. This is, now I'm in the 60s, in the late 60s. And then I quit school, moved to San Francisco to hang out with all the hippies and radicals and the San Francisco Mime Troupe, which was doing this glorious agitprop, highly political leftist theater that was like, oh my God, I had no idea that I could be that potent, you know, and that explicit about issues. And ended up in Washington as an actress with Living Stage, which was doing work to change people's lives. But the main focus was working with children and inner city kids. And that was the biggest transformational experience, I think, in my life, was realizing that you could do theater that was about important things, that reached young people, and that could be in forms that was not just, you know, iambic pentameter, or, you know, whatever it is that we call Shakespeare. Not that I don't love those things, but it was just a new world. And Living Stage was improvisational. I'm a very good improviser. But then gradually, the director of the company started asking me if I would script some of the things that we had improvised. Because every once in a while we'd do one that was so hot. I'd say, oh, let's keep it. So I became the playwright kind of in residence at that company, and then gradually moved into writing my own plays. So, and I still, I'm leaving, but I'm still talking. So the first full-length play that I did, that got produced, the one, and then I got the Charles MacArthur Award. But we're all Charles MacArthur Award winners, I think.
No, I'm not yet. Nominated, but like, this is a Lucia.
That's the Helen Hayes New Play Award. It was actually based on a story from the Washington Post about a young man who was a drug dealer who was shot in the neck and became a quadriplegic. And there's a fantastic 2 or 3 page spread that the Post did at the time about him, what happened to him and his life, etc. And I didn't write his story, but I borrowed the story for my play, and we made it into a musical as well. It was great, and then I was hooked. But you don't make money being a playwright. And so I teach. I occasionally act, but not very much. And my primary thing has become directing, which I also really love, because it's I'm still pretty focused on a type of show that I like to do, things that has something to do with social issues and contemporary themes, etc. Stage.
Renee Calarco, what motivated you to go into playwriting as opposed to other genres?
I come from a family that loves theater, just loves it. My maternal grandfather was a playwright and a songwriter. And my mother was a singer. I had an uncle who was an opera singer, but nobody was ever professional. So people worked really hard at these incredibly hard day jobs, and would do their art on the side. And my maternal grandfather also he adored musicals. So when I was a kid, he had this whole, those really huge stereos that take up half the wall in your living room. And he had all these original cast albums, you know, Andy Get Your Gun and Fiddler on the Roof, and I would just sit there and he would play them for me over and over and over, and I'd sit and listen. And I could probably sing You Can't Get Away with a Gun, but I wouldn't. But so it just, listening to that music, you know, sort of made the pictures in my head, because I never, you know, I was young and I never saw any of these musicals, I just knew them from the music. And so then as I got older, I have two younger brothers, and my youngest brother, Joe, is a playwright and a director in New York, and when we were really little, we would put on shows in the backyard for the Jerry Lewis telethon. So, so we did that for a while, but I ended up doing theater in high school as an actor. I did theater, I started as a theater major in college, and then quickly switched to English, far more practical. And I'd always been a writer, but I never really wrote plays. It really intimidated me, and I don't know why. When I eventually moved to Washington for work, right after college, I got into improvisation and started learning how to do comedy improv, and did that for years and years and years. And it eventually occurred to me that what improv was really playwriting, but without the laptop. And so I thought, you know, I thought I wanted to be an actor, and I'm glad I didn't stick with it, because I'm you know, not very good. But I can do improv, and once I realized that what I was essentially doing for, you know, close to 15 years was playwriting, but without the laptop, I thought, all right, why not sort of give this a go and see if I can write something. And so I did, and so that's, I came to playwriting kind of through the back door, through improv, through the gateway drug to playwriting. I still, I teach improv, I teach playwriting, but it's really, I mean, the reason I write plays is because it's the way I think as a writer. I have friends who are poets and novelists, and a friend of mine who's written, you know, she's written 3 novels, and she says to me, "Oh, you should write a novel." And I'm like, "Are you crazy? I've never in a million years." You know, because the thing that just blows my mind about novelists is, you know, as you probably know, like, you know, you might be 200 pages into it, and then what if it's not working? You know, if I've got a play and it's, you know, I'm like 50 pages in, or even, you know, 90 pages in, I'm like, God, this sucks. But, you know, I can put it aside and think, well, surely there's something in this that I can use in a different play. It's only 90 pages. It's not, you know, 250. And so, it's not that I can't commit to writing, but I just cannot think that big. I can only think in terms of immediacy and in terms of dialogue. I think in terms of dialogue, always, 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 it's always language and not anything else. So it's kind of this is sort of the way I think. So that's how I do it.
So, Renee, your comments were the perfect segue into the next question. Playwriting, in contrast to the other forms of literary genre, combines several skills. Writing, putting down one word after the other, and then literal visualization. How will what you write look on a stage? So I'm assuming you have to have some sense of visualization as well. And then staging. How will I bring my ideas and plots to move across a stage? It seems to be much more multi-dimensional playwriting than other genres. So I was wondering, I guess we'll start again with Mary Hall. Which one do you start with first? Do you start with putting down the words? Do you visualize it first? And is one of those skills or aspects of playwriting more important than the others? How do you usually start? Do you start with staging? Do you start with the writing? Maybe you could speak to that if each of you would. Thank you.
Well, I think something that Jennifer and I have in common, which is that we're directors as well as writers. And I don't, obviously, Jennifer is good at speaking for herself, so I'll let her do it. But well, actually, I went to an event the other night at Woolly Mammoth where we were asked to put a name tag on that said, "Describe yourself." And people wrote director, playwright. I wrote envisioner because I truly, that's how I approach my projects. And I haven't written a play in a very long time that I've not been the original director for. Some people would say that's a bad thing, but that's just how it works for me. And so I start with everything, thinking about what it is going to look like, what it's going to sound like. Particularly, I write a lot of musicals. I do a lot of collaborations with puppet designers. I've had the same set designer and lighting designer for 13 years, Dan Covey and Tony Chisak, and so when I immediately think of them and their skills when I start. This first play I ever wrote professionally was developed through improvisation with my theater company in California. I knew the actors I was writing for. And this is actually a pretty obnoxious thing to say, is that I've never, with one exception, I have never written a play that was not produced. And that's because I was always writing for a particular circumstance, or I was commissioned by a theater knowing that it was going to happen. So there are other ways to write plays, which is to have an idea that then you write the play and you take it to a theater and you say, please, oh please, will you reproduce this, right? So it makes me unpopular sometimes, I think, with my colleagues, but at the same time, I think it is, it's something I need to do. I need to go home and just think about, just creating something that's just what I want to create, and then try to, shop it around. So I don't know if that answers the question.
So you visualize it as a whole first.
Well, I don't know if whole is true. There's certainly, I think, imagining what it's going to be like three-dimensionally impacts profoundly what it is like two-dimensionally. But ultimately, you have to get it on the page, and it's got to work structurally, and it's got to work moment for moment. But also, I think in theater, you have the opportunity to try it out. I don't know how, of course, I guess with a novel, you write the novel, you send it to your friends, you send it to editors, you get input, you change it, you whatever. But with theater, it's great. You get immediate, as soon as it comes out of somebody's mouth, I know whether it's going to work or not, just instantaneously. I don't always know how to fix it. And that's, therein lies the problem. But in my gut, I immediately know if it's working or not.
Do you start with an idea? Do you have the idea first?
Oh, sure.
The subject matter?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah. I do a lot of adaptations of books, or I have a whole canon of things that I created with a composer named David Maddox, where we started with traditional material, all the material that I threw out when I first started doing theater for children, which were fairy tales, because I'd only seen terrible productions of them that were about this deep, and so I rejected an entire, canon of literature and myth because I thought it was, going to put the wool over children's eyes. And then I had a daughter that loved fairy tales, and so I had to rethink that. And so, yes, I start either with a text that I'm interested in adapting. Early in my career, I would always start with the cause, because I was very politically motivated, still am, but probably to the detriment of some of my earlier work, and that I was communicating through a cause rather than through characters. So my plays were about this rather than relationships among people. Not that that's bad, but I think that was an evolution that I went through as a writer, to really think about what's happening among the people as opposed to what it is I want the audience to make sure they get out of this. My sledgehammer has evolved. It has different surfaces to it now, to make a joke on my own name, but to, whack people upside the head in a variety of ways, not quite just the boom way.
Thank you. Jennifer?
What was the question again?
Oh, sure. There's the writing, when you start to write a play, there's the writing, then there's the staging that you have to visualize, and then the moving about the stage and how you present it. Which one do you start with? And do you think one is more important than the other to begin, or how do you begin?
Well, I think everybody begins in different ways, and I think probably even each writer may begin, each piece might come from someplace different. It might come from a line that you think of, or you hear, or something that you see, or like as I said, the one play I did started with an article in the Post, and I wasn't trying to write that story, but it was a great jumping off place to start with a young man who had been very vital and active, albeit in selling drugs, but ends up a quadriplegic in a poor family. You know, and the notion like, well, what's going to happen to this kid? You know, he can't write, he can even feed himself, and now he's. And I've also worked a lot in just with disabled kids, so I think that was also part of that I brought that into that too. It's like his life now will become the life of the poor, disabled, the impoverished. I mean, not unfortunately. And so that was the beginning of that. So it sometimes it's an image, sometimes it's a person. You know, like how like you see somebody and you start imagining, who is this person? What's going on in your life? And the imagination takes off from there. I always do a fair amount of research, I think, with mine, with the exception of the last full-length one that I actually completed, which was much more personal and started from a conversation I had I was at a cocktail party with some very dear friends, and I had been very intrigued with the idea of what would your life, what does it mean to be happy? You know, and if you think about that for yourself, what does it mean for you personally to be happy? If you're not happy now, what would it take for you that would make you happy? So I think I became kind of a bore at parties, because eventually I'd always say, you know, hey, can I ask you a question? And so I had been just got into some very interesting conversations, and I was at one party with dear friends, and I asked a friend about it, and he burst out crying. This is the truth. He said he couldn't think about it, because if he thought about it, he'd have to change his life. And I was, it was like, to me, of like, wow, what does that mean? And then that became, even though that's not exactly in the play, it was the thing that started me. Right. So sometimes it's, something somebody says, something they're wearing, who knows? The imagination is limitless. It's the Antarctica. The soul, we don't know. It's huge, and there's layers and layers and layers, and there are things frozen in the ice that we don't know, and sometimes a landslide will happen and reveal something that nobody knew was there, etc. And they're whales.
So the question is, where does one start?
Yeah, with those components, which one do you start with? How do you weave them together and so on?
It depends. So I generally don't start writing it until I have an idea of who's in the play and who they are and how they speak and what they want. Because that's coming up through improv and having to create theater on the spot, it helps if you create a character first with wants and needs. And once you've got these characters who want something, character A wants this, character B wants this, they're opposite, it all blows up and you've got a story. So I don't start writing until I know who is in the play. But as far as ideas for plays, they just come from all over the place. I might hear a song, somebody might have said something that was really interesting. Working on a new play right now that actually comes from a story that was in the Washington Post magazine a few years back. And sometimes I can see how the play is going to look on stage. Sometimes I see how it may look. Excuse me. The play that I'm writing now, I'm determined to start it with somebody digging a hole in the ground. I don't know if it's going to stay, but it got me started. And the one thing learned, especially when the play goes into rehearsal, is that directors, if you're not directing your own work, directors bring so much to what you have written. I've had the great good fortune to work a lot with my brother, and which is lovely. We get along great, and the last play that we did together, I went into rehearsal, and I was there almost every day. I went away, I came back, and he said, I want you to look at this one scene and let me know what you think. And he staged it in such a way that he had this one character just coming on stage and scattering rose petals, which is something I had not written into the play. But he put that in, and I thought, that's great. So it starts from a lot of different things, and I try not to be too wed to what I see in my head necessarily, because sometimes it may not work.
As a woman playwright, have you had challenges within the industry that male playwrights have not had? I subscribe to 2 newsletters from Hollywood screenwriters, women screenwriters, and those newsletters are always just full of how small the representation is in Hollywood of women screenwriters, how they never get the best directorships, they never get the good parts, they never get the high backing. And I was just wondering what challenges are there for women playwriting? Do you want to start then?
I was getting me first.
If ever, maybe there's no difference, I don't know.
Well, of course there's a difference. I mean, the Theater Communications Group is a national service organization for theaters in America, and they do a survey every year of the most produced plays. And this year there is a woman among the top 10 plays who's a playwright. Last year there were 2. And that's just the reality. It's interesting, in theater for young audiences, I think because women have had the primary responsibility for children in our culture, there have been more women in the field of theater for young audiences. And also because the genesis of much theater for young audiences in this country initially were settlement houses and junior leagues and education associations, which were again dominated by women. And so I can think of some of the major writers for family audiences in this country, and as well as abroad, are women. However, more often than not, when I'm sitting in a production meeting, which is the time when you get together with the director and the designers and the producers and everyone, there are times when I am the only woman in the room. So do people not do my plays because I'm a gal? I can't imagine that anyone would consciously make that decision to go, oh my God, a woman wrote this, I'm not doing this. I think, I don't know, this is always hard for me. It's like I don't like being referred to as a woman playwright, because who calls Shakespeare a man playwright? You know, my father, bless him, would talk about, I want to see my woman doctor. And I'd say, well, I'm going to see my man doctor. So I mean, I'm very conscious of wanting to write good roles for women, because there's not enough good roles for women. So I'm very conscious of that. If I have a choice of a designer, well, I'm not my set and lighting designer because I'm married to them, but if I have a choice of hiring people in everything I do, I consciously look to hire women, and also women of color. That's very important to me. But the same way that I don't want to feel that I am prescribed in what I can think and do and write because I'm a white girl from Kentucky, I try to approach everyone with as an openness of what it is their art is communicating to me. So I hope my profession does this to me too. I know I sound like Pollyanna, but I just try to do my best work and get on with it, and hope that people see it for what it is and ask me to do it more.
Okay, I ditto several of the things that Mahal said. I have to add though that it's less an issue for me than being a black playwright is. But being a black woman playwright, it's like, okay, you start out in, outside the wall and then see if you can make your way to first base. Because there is an assumption on the part of producers that we will be writing about certain things. And if our work doesn't conform to a particular category, then it's harder to be taken seriously. And there has become a pretty good-sized black theater community nationally, which is struggling to survive, and I don't know, frankly, what's going to happen there. We don't know anymore. But it has its own kind of little category blocks, about what the content of the plays will be, who's writing them, etc. But we're at this place right now. I'm trying to write a little article about it. That where we're in the name of breaking some of these barriers down, at least the racial, the ethnic issues. We're in this murky area of who can write what story. Can I, as a woman, write a story about a man? For men, well, that's not so unusual. We know this. We write about men. But can I write a story about a white man, for example, or white men? Can a white man write a story about black women? Can an Asian write a story about Latinos? It's kind of murky water there right now, but in a way it's fantastic because it means things are changing. It's a difficult change for a lot of people because there are going to be a lot of people, whenever there's a ground shift, some people fall off the end of the earth. So I don't.
We got the anarcho of the soul.
But you know what I mean? You hear what I'm saying? That it's like and these are, since they're not written rules, you can't run at them directly to break them or to tear them down. There are assumptions that underline a lot of what we do and in our industry as well as in the rest of the country. And I know, for example, as a director, I primarily, not primarily, only get asked to direct shows that are either by black writers or they're about black people. Nobody asks me to direct Shakespeare, not that I'm dying to direct Shakespeare, but it's like I'm in a category just because of what I look like, not because of of my skills or my talent. And so the assumption also that anything I write is going to be particularly about black people or for black people. Gender is not the issue, it's the skin color or the culture. So I can't answer any more clearly about the women thing than I can, because it's, to me, I can't separate the two.
I have so much has been discussed and written about this, about gender parity in theater, not just in terms of playwrights, but in terms of directors as well, in terms of roles that are written for actors. So I really nothing to add to that other than it's true. I mean, there are a lot, plays are being written by women. There are a ton of women playwrights who, in Washington, all over, who are not being produced. Why? We don't know. The other thing that I find kind of interesting is the language that is used to describe the work of women and versus the language that's used to describe the work of men, particularly in criticism. And I'm not. This is not all about me, but I had a play that was reviewed recently, relatively recently here, And the language that was used to describe some elements of the play, honestly, I felt were kind of sexist. And in terms of, there's an element that I used that might have been described any number of ways, as it didn't work, as it was clunky, as it was, it was poorly written, what have you. That I can handle. But it was described that it was described as being cute, which I doubt if a man had written the play, it would not have been described as cute. I can handle it's terrible, it's clunky, it doesn't work, it's awkward, it comes from another play. That I can handle. Cute? That doesn't, no. Because it wasn't cute, and it was not a cute play. So that's just one example. The other thing that kind of, I sort of lump into this whole category as well is age. I'm of a certain age. I didn't go to graduate school. I don't have an MFA in playwriting. And lately that seems to be the path of playwrights now. That it's become very, very professionalized, and folks follow a path. It's incredibly competitive. And so, especially the Ivy Leagues are turning out all of these MFAs who are coming out in, relatively small programs, groups of 4, 8, or 8, maybe MFAs are coming out of Yale and Brown and NYU. And so because these young folks are being stamped with, an Ivy League degree and a stamp of approval, they're getting produced, which, hooray, is terrific. But I often wonder, at the expense of playwrights who are a little bit older and been around the block a couple of times, and maybe who don't have the MFA. So, I don't know, it's kind of an elliptical answer. Yeah, so.
Well, now I'll open up the questions to the audience. Do you have any questions for these fabulous women? Anyone have a question they'd like to ask? Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Would you
good
like to
afternoon.
Identify yourself?
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Linda Reese Davidson. And I just wanted to ask, when did the MFA become important in terms of playwright? Is this something new, or has it always been that way?
It seems kind of new, right? Oh, sorry. It seems kind of new, right? I mean, so.
Like new 10 years? New?
Yeah, oh yeah, in the last 10
Yeah.
years, yeah.
Like in the
Okay.
last 10 years, probably, yeah.
And can I
We
just
should all just
that?
come up here.
Let's do a scary.
It's a trio.
And we match.
It's cute.
I like that.
The MFA in general for writers is relatively new, and I hear a great deal about this again from my sister, who's not the poet laureate anymore, but the MFA for poetry has, and other writers, has grown exponentially in the same way, and a lot of it is because colleges have realized it was a cash cow. I mean, let's just be honest about it, that it's a way of, people who want to be writers, here's a place where you can go, and this notion that you're going to get an MFA in playwriting, or an MFA in poetry, or an MFA in, some other writing craft in particular, is going to be your ticket to getting published and getting produced. And then they get out and they're really annoyed and disappointed unless they go to this handful of Ivy League schools, because they're not getting published, they're not getting produced, they feel cheated, and now they're $40,000 or more in debt, and nobody is interested in their script or their play. An MFA from University of Omaha, or a small school that nobody has heard of, is not going to get you produced. Maybe an MFA from Brown might.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Have you ever considered changing your name to kind of disguise the fact that you're female? Somebody had once suggested to me that, instead of being Pamela H. Lehigh, you should submit under PH Lehigh, and then nobody would know that it was a woman submitting it. And I was just like, I don't know, my name's Pamela. I don't want to hide it, but would you ever consider it?
Although I'll tell you, there are a couple of plays written by men in which that's part of the story, is that a man, to the beginning it was actually a white man who's written a play or a book or something about a black woman and published it under a woman's name, and then it gets picked up and then he has to hide. So, but no.
I will, as an antidote to something that Jennifer said, my first and among my most successful plays is a play I wrote about Jackie Robinson. I was 24 and didn't know any better. But basically there was one black actor in our theater in California, and he wanted to write or have a show for him about Jackie Robinson. And I said, okay, let's do it. And I particularly this was in the 80s, you know, I got a lot of pushback. You know, how could you write this? And I said, well, so my white girl in Kentucky joke. I said, so all of my plays have got to be just about me? You know, I have an Antarctica in my head. You know, there's things I can unfollow, or things I can follow, but nonetheless, just interesting. That's what launched my career, was Jackie Robinson.
Just think if you'd have called it 42.
All about timing. All about timing. Interesting, another little sidebar there, that two of the most popular plays by African American writers on the stage in the last couple of years have been written by African American women about men. About, you know, with men as the major characters.
What are those two, Jennifer?
The Mountaintop.
No,
Mountains and Sun was written in the 50s. The Mountaintop and what is Lydia Diamond's play? Stick Fly.
Are there any other questions? Any other
I
questions?
wanted
Yes, ma'am.
to ask Jennifer, you said that there, in terms of the Black theater movement, that there is you don't know what's happening, I mean, what's going to happen. What did that mean? What did you mean by that?
There's no funding, and a lot of the writers, the younger writers in particular, are now, will, instead of taking, it used to be so because we couldn't get produced anywhere else, we would take our plays automatically to the Black theaters. But if there's no funding, if there's no money there to get produced, they're gonna go where they can get produced. There are also more young African American writers who are coming out of these MFA programs, and so they already got a little attention before they're even out of school, and their shows, their plays are getting picked up by Yale and by, you know, et cetera. And so you know, it's like it's a combination of the market changing and the audience changing that I don't know yet what that will mean. But you know, again, you know, probably all the major Black playwrights that you can think of who are writing now they're not being if they're being produced by Black theaters, it's after they've already been produced by someone else.
Which raises questions about, you know, their Asian American repertory theaters and Latin, you know, based theaters. That there was a profound need for these kind of theaters in the last 25 years, as our culture is moving in different directions. What really are the roles of those theaters, and what's going to happen? And you know, many companies are diversifying their seasons, not nearly as much as they should. I mean, they're checking some boxes, certainly, but it is impacting the culturally specific theater movement in America in a very deep way.
It's kind of like the Miss Black America syndrome. Never mind.
Take your word.
Yeah.
I once heard a college professor in a drama school say that more of his students had played video games in the last month than attended a play. And mind you, these were students in a drama program. So my question is, have you noticed any trends relative to the technology as it affects live theater?
I teach undergrad at GW in playwriting, and at least in my classes, I tend to get a lot of kids who've never seen a play, who've never been to a play, who've never read a play. And they come from all different majors and all different areas. Just in my class, you know, I noticed that some kids end up writing plays about, you know, well, actually, it was this great play this one kid wrote, fantastic, that uses Skype as sort of a framing device, and it's really, really, it was really, really written. So there are kids like that who are finding a way to take technology and life today and making it theatrical. But then, you know, as you know, always there are kids who are just trying to sort of figure out how theater works and are writing things that maybe aren't quite plays yet. That maybe they're really a television show. But then the other thing that was sort of heartening this past semester is that there were 2 young men in my class, like the biggest like jocks you could ever imagine. 2 guys on the baseball team. And they were in love with writing for theater. I mean, in love with it. And there was this one, we, as a guest speaker on campus this past semester, Tony Kushner was there, playwright Tony Kushner. And I made my kids go see him speak. And these 2 baseball players came up to me and said, "Oh, well, you know, we're going to go, but we've got a game, but we're going to go." And then one kid turns to the other and says, "He is crazy about Tony Kushner. I don't believe it." And I'm like, "Really? This is great." And which, I mean, they were there. They got there late, but they were there and they stood for the whole thing. And you know, so it's kind of all over the place.
Well, I mean, technology is having a huge impact on theater all over the world, in good ways and very challenging ways. It's affecting the form. It's providing a whole new vocabulary for us as artists to embrace. But I think for me, I find myself as attracted as I am to a lot of using the new technologies. Is that I like to come back to what is it that theater can do that no other art form can do, and to build on the strength of that. But it's impacting how theaters are relating to their audiences now. There's an enormous amount of emphasis, and with my festival at the Atlas Performing Arts Center, this is a very big part of what we're looking at is because students are playing video games, and they can essentially curate their own entertainment in this little box, which they keep with them all the time. At our peril, we ignore these transformations of how they relate to the world. And it's not that every play needs to have a Skype scene in it, but you do have to just acknowledge that it's a different currency. And if we want to be able to have conversations with this new generation, then and actually I find it very exciting. So attendance is actually incrementally growing in the 35s and under in American theater. And a lot of it is through the innovations that theater companies are using through social media and technology.
I would just add that I see there are a lot of our most creative minds wanting to go more into film and television than I'm not aware of. I know a couple of kids are interested in video games, but because there's the possibility of actually making a living, and because it's easier in a way nowadays to get yourself a camera, and then you make a YouTube series, and which you can have people subscribe. And some of the most creative work that I've seen has been there's one that's really popular that it's a young woman who started it. It's called Adventures of a Young Black Girl. Or
Awkward Black Girl.
Awkward Black Girl, which is it's an internet sensation, or maybe starting to fade now because there's new stuff coming all the time. But it was somebody, she wanted to be a filmmaker, and she got a camera, started making film. Writing the scripts, starring in the scripts, and then posting them herself. So I think that's that kind of thing we're going to see more and more competition with, specifically the video game world. Although there's certainly a lot of video games, these will become more interactive. That maybe you could put yourself in it, in a game and play it that way.
Okay, well, thank you. If you all have questions, you're welcome to stay after and talk to our great panelists.
That was great.
is, I have a brief program, honors every month, women writers from 4 states. It's called the 50 State Project. And this month, we're honoring women writers from Maine, it's alphabetical, Louisiana, Kentucky, and Kansas. So I need 2 volunteers. We read excerpts from the women's writing. And I already have 1 volunteer who is going to read from Kentucky. So if anybody, and I hope maybe one of our panelists or more might do it, it just takes about 20 minutes. It's videotaped and it's sent around to the centers for the book in all 50 states. So if anybody's interested in doing that, thank you very much. And these women were just fabulous.
Weren't they?
We're just so honored to have each of you here. It's a tremendous honor. Thank you so much. Thank you.